Welcome back to Hill's Kitchen and welcome to part 2 of vegan barbecue meatballs and vulnerability. This recipe I've never made, but it is by the one, the only Tabitha Brown. They have de-thawed after much suspense and I have prepped the onions and the red peppers. I will say you're supposed to like shred it, like put it in a food processor, but I don't have one, so that has created a bit of drama for me, but it is not the end of the world. I have oil and, I need barbecue sauce, which is hiding from me, as well as maple syrup. Okay, I have that. Okay, barbecue sauce, period. Okay, now we're ready. This recipe is super duper simple. If I don't make it, it's because I had this come in and out of the freezer too many times, but as a whole, all you're supposed to do is like take the meat, or the vegan meat, right? You're supposed to take the vegan meat, combine it with the like minced garlic and red pepper or whatever. Right, in the pan, you just cook it there. So it's only supposed to take a few minutes, so here we go. First of all, vulnerability, you know what I mean? It's a tricky game because it can really go a lot of ways. You know, hold up. Let me really do what I need to do. Anyway, vulnerability is a dangerous game. And so I want to talk about what happens when it's mutual, like you're giving vulnerability and so is the other person, versus when it's not mutual. So when it's mutual, as I said in the other video, I feel like it really can set y'all both free and it can create a powerful moment that speaks life into both parties. So it doesn't mean y'all are going to be besties per se, but it definitely can like build a relationship. However, when it is not mutual, yes, it can cause problems. Now, see, I think the issue there then is that people assume, oh, well, then I shouldn't really be vulnerable if it can fall into the wrong hands. And this is a very hot take, but I do believe you should be vulnerable anyway. Because let's get real, in order for you to develop deep relationships, you're going to have to be vulnerable. So to like wait until it's all going to be perfect is kind of crazy. Like that's not how bonds and relationships and friendships work. Like they're inherently risky. So if you're looking to get close to people or just have any form of community, you are going to have to be vulnerable and share genuine things about yourself. It's always going to exist on a superficial level if you're scared to tell people what your dreams are, what you've been through, what your secrets are, your fears are, things like that. Like you are going to have to like, you know, risk the biscuit. You can't just be like, oh, I want great friends, but I don't want to be hurt. I don't want like anybody to know too much about me. I don't want anybody to switch up on me. You can't control that. And that doesn't just apply to friendships. That applies to family, romantic relationships, business deals, opportunities. Like there's always going to be a risk with human beings because that's how human beings are. So if you're going to stay guarded, then yeah, I guess you'll have some friends, some partners, some opportunities, but not as many as you could if you show up as your full self, which requires you to tell the truth about what you've been through, where you're at presently, and where you're going down the line. So when it's not reciprocated, obviously, yeah, you can get hurt and that can scar you, but that shouldn't limit you. That shouldn't prevent you from ever being vulnerable. Something that after filming this video, or part 1, something that occurred to me was that I feel like Jesus was actually the best example of that because he had 12 disciples knowing which one was going to betray him. The world would say, oh, he should have just rocked with the 11. He should have dropped Judas. He should have chose better. He played himself by having somebody in his circle that wasn't really for him or that was going to do him dirty in the end. But ultimately, I think he kept it that way, A, so that, you know, God's will could be done, but then B, to show why vulnerability matters. Because you know what I realized? In order for Jesus to get the 12 disciples, he had to be okay with the one that would betray him. So realistically, if he wasn't vulnerable at all, he would have no disciples. Clearly, vulnerability and fellowship matters. Hence why the New Testament is set up the way it is. And even that verse about, you know, being sent out in twos, that matters to God and that should matter to us. So to isolate yourself or to pretend like you can get by in life without ever being vulnerable is messy. If you do the math, it's still a net gain. Yes, Judas hurt Jesus, but Jesus still had 11 people he really rocked with, and they all were empowered. Like he was able to like set the course of their life and like set them into their purpose because of the fellowship that they had with him in his 3 years of ministry. It was the greater good. Yeah, Judas was problematic, but like, where would it have been if there was no Andrew, no Peter, no Matthew, no Mark? I'm grateful that Jesus was willing to be betrayed in order to show the importance of vulnerability, of community, and of, you know, being in purpose, and how that can be revealed through the people you're walking with. Yes, vulnerability can open you up to getting hurt, but it's not the end of the world. And that's happened to me, getting hurt through being vulnerable with the wrong people, or not really being at a place to be at the capacity to handle somebody's vulnerability. But then it's just like, right, then y'all move on. It doesn't necessarily make you a bad person or them a bad person. I think the issue is when you're actually betraying somebody's trust intentionally. Because it's one thing if you actually aren't in a place to receive what somebody's telling you or what they're going through, and you should just express that. But to like make it seem like you're their friend or you're really here for them and you're not, that's a very messy choice, and that's not the same. Hence why Judas was really betraying Jesus. Like, again, if they were just like friend of a friend of a friend of a friend, it wouldn't have been that big of a deal. But the fact that Judas knew Jesus so up close and still did that, that is betrayal, because he knew so much about Jesus. Like, he was in the inner circle. So to me, it's not betrayal if you can't handle somebody's vulnerability and you say that. It is betrayal if you've been fine with it for however long and you're leading them to believe one thing when you're actually out doing the other. So let's get clear about that. I think that whole dynamic is the perfect example of vulnerability gone right and wrong. Okay, so now I have to turn the meatballs. I think I have it up a little too high. I wish I had just kind of combined some of these because they look very tiny. But we digress. Now I'm supposed to pour the maple syrup on, and then I will get into the tea. So I say that bit about Jesus because I want it to be known Jesus couldn't have lived the life that he did if he didn't value vulnerability and prioritize that in his ministry. And thus, it is not of God for you to try to like do life without friends, without people, without community, and to try to be as closed off, as walled off as possible. I think in order to have a close relationship with God, let alone other human beings, you have to be vulnerable. And the older I get, the more I see the value of vulnerability. Because I didn't care like that growing up. Like, I just, wouldn't let anybody see me cry, was very private about everything I was going through, was a firm believer of moving in silence, and nobody knew too much about me. But I think growing up then showed me how much your vulnerability can help other people and help you. And I realized, there's no point in me holding everything in. There's no point in me like trying to do so much on my own, emotionally and mentally and spiritually. That's not gonna work. And I think something that actually changed that for me was like being in belong groups and Bible studies, because even though y'all are technically strangers, with you all having Christianity in common, you're able to just get very deep with each other off the bat. And I found that you could tell people things in confidence and in security that you couldn't tell people in your real life. So it's like, because faith is so vulnerable and personal, everybody's believing for something, everybody's going through something. So in order for y'all to actually like boost your faith, people are talking about things they've been through in their finances, in relationships, in their career, things like that, and so are you. So you become close very quickly. Yeah, some people may be kind of standoffish or may not partake, but the more you share and the more others share, the more the group actually succeeds. Because of the context in which we met, we were already willing to be very honest with each other and willing to like be forthright about what we were going through and what we needed out of community and out of like help from others. So I just really rebuke this spirit that like, I can do it all by myself, because you see that all the time on social media, in particular Twitter, that this sentiment of like, well, that's why you shouldn't trust people, and that's why you need to move in silence, and you shouldn't be telling people so much about you, and I would rather go to the grave than for somebody to know X, Y, and Z about me and stuff like that, and nobody should ever see you fail, like y'all tell too much on the internet. And while I get where they're coming from to some extent, because yes, have discernment, still care about your privacy, and like be wise about what you're sharing online, at the same time, to be waiting again for somebody else to lead with their vulnerability is a bit messy, because you could be setting somebody free, yourself included, by you sharing what you're really going through and what you've been through. So many people have been through really wild stuff, but they're too busy afraid of their image, so they're never going to get online and say what they've really been through, which is preventing others from being seen, feeling heard, feeling validated, and like getting community that they really deserve. I feel like there's a lot of famous people that actually are alcoholics and or have a relationship with sobriety that we just don't know about. Doesn't mean we're entitled to know. However, if they were to share, yes, that would help a number of people who too are struggling and don't have community for it. There's a number of famous people who have dealt with abuse or assault or things like that. Do they owe us that business? Not necessarily. But again, if they're brave enough to share it, that would help others. So it's like, I'm now of the belief that like we're not entitled to anybody's vulnerability, nor is it an expectation that we have to be vulnerable all the time, like with everybody we know. However, seeing as vulnerability is a very powerful gift, the more you give it, the better. That's the only way you're really gonna build trust, is to be able to just take it there with people. I don't think you should do that, the first moment you meet them, but at the same time, like to be like, oh, I want good friends, or I want this kind of relationship, but you're afraid to like tell people where you're really at and what you're going through is messy. And in hindsight, I'm gonna be very real. If I was being very transparent at a young age about the things I was going through and had the like language to realize what was going on around me, I wouldn't have the friends that I had at the time, because a lot of them actually didn't know how to hold space for me. And because I was afraid to be without friends, I was holding on to people who really weren't that invested about my success or my well-being. Then that kind of taught me, oh, I don't need to tell people too much. Like, let me keep it cute. Let me keep it surface level. And then I'll have friends. Then I'll have meaningful relationships. And to be honest, I would have rather me have less friends and like I'm close to the right few than to have been rolling with the people that I was as a teenager and in middle school, knowing a lot of them weren't big on vulnerability. I felt like they were able to share a lot with me about themselves, but I wasn't able to share as much with them because I was perceptive enough to realize, oh, they don't like when I talk about my family drama, or oh, they don't know how to like react when I talk about, this wild relationship I'm in. And it's like, I have the grace to know, okay, they didn't really know how to hold space for me, and we were all very young, so I get it. But at the same time, it was foreshadowing me going back and forth with people who didn't have the capacity to have a deep friendship with me and then trying to stay friends with them anyway. As an authentic person, if my vulnerability bothers you or scares you or like makes you feel away, like you shut down or you don't know how to take it or you're very critical of me, then that to me says, okay, you're not somebody I'm going to try to stay close to, or, oh, this isn't the relationship I thought it was. Because I'm just like, I'm not going to front. I'm not going to pretend that my life isn't what it is. So like if it bothers you, if my past bothers you, my present bothers you, or my future intimidates you, it's a wrap. I think because I didn't value vulnerability as a younger person, then I was out here in close friendships with people who weren't really going to be there for me in the long run, or even in the short term as well. And then you get older and you realize, oh, that's actually very dangerous to be in close quarters with people who don't get it. Yes, Jesus had a Judas, but he did it to like prove a point and to like save humanity. So that's a good exception. But if your life has several Judases or several people where you feel like you have very shallow bonds with, I think that is something to sit with and reflect on, because either you don't trust them or you've never attempted to trust them more. So if you reevaluate everybody in your life through the lens of vulnerability, like they gonna rock with you regardless of whether you are or not sober, whether you are or are not clean, or what you're going through in your family, your finances, your faith, whatever. If you go off of that lens, yeah, you will very quickly realize who is for you, who is against you, and like what comes of it. And I feel like that's why it's kind of true that it's easier to tell a stranger something about you than a close friend, because we care what that close person thinks of us and not so much the stranger. And so you're able to tell a stranger sometimes really wild stuff and you don't feel judged. You don't feel violated. You're just like, oh, whatever. And yet somehow there's this fear that like, oh, I can't really tell the people close to me what I'm going through, what I'm believing for, what I'm experiencing. And that's sad. I get it because I've definitely been there, but I do think the goal is to come up higher than that. Okay, these look fantastic. I just have to add barbecue sauce and then we're done. I'm gonna add a little bit more sauce. Only a hair. I wanna make sure I did what Tabitha wanted, you know. That's mother. I want her to be proud of me. I want her to be proud of me when she does see this. Now, I was looking for scripture to halfway back this up, but it does go back to Corinthians where God talks about like his power is made great in our weakness. And again, the first definition of vulnerability is that it's like a weak spot or this like exposed bit. And it's like, I think vulnerability doesn't make you weak. That is something that took me a long time to say. Shout out to therapy. But vulnerability doesn't make you weak. So it's like, once you sit with that it doesn't make you weak, then you see, oh, it does matter who I can be vulnerable with and like how often am I able to be vulnerable in my day-to-day life. And like, this is empty. I knew it. All I know is this. I feel like we be yoking ourselves with just anybody and just anything and then try to get vulnerable after the fact. And something about our body, our spirit won't let us really get honest with that person. And I'm like, there's a reason for that. And that's because that's not actually who we're supposed to be in community with. We can't be vulnerable with them. And that's why I believe we should lead with vulnerability. Because then you find out from the jump. Okay, where do they stand? Is this going to be a trigger point? Is this going to work? You find that out very quickly. Which is why sometimes modern dating tickles me. I mean, it tickles me for a lot of reasons. But I feel like a lot of people would just get into a relationship just to be in one and then try to, as the months and years go by, then try to see if they're compatible, which is silly to me. I'm the type where I'm going to lay it all out from the beginning. Like, I need you to know there's some crucial bits that we got to establish before we can go any further. And I think that's fair because I'm like, I don't want to lead you on. I don't want you to think this is more than what it is. So you need to know how ambitious I am. You need to know how much of a believer I'm in. I'm like, why lie? Like, I'm not going to hide it. So that's not coming on too strong. That's me trying to do you a favor. Because if you can roll with it, cool. And if you can't, you can't. Like, why would I wait till we're like months in a relationship or years in to be like, oh, by the way, here's this very crucial thing about me that like everybody else knows, but I was afraid to tell you because I didn't want to lose you. It's like, we covering all sorts of ground on the initial dates because I don't want any foolishness. I don't want there to be any games. And I feel the same way about friendship. I mean, friendship is lower stakes to some extent, but I'm like, no, I'm not going to pretend that everybody is for me. I'm like, I know for a fact everybody is not for me. Like, you do have to choose your company carefully. So if that then means vulnerability is the filter, perfect. Some people are bothered that you have certain convictions. Some people are going to be bothered that you have a specific standard or vision for your life. To try to downplay it or hide it because you want to have enough friends or have enough people with you for a birthday trip or whatever, bye. It's corny. Y'all could take anybody to Disneyland. Y'all could take anybody on a holiday trip, on a girls trip. But very few can you like break down in front of and like talk about what's really going on. Obviously, you should have the highest vulnerability with God, but I do feel like some people are God sent because of how they're able to hold space for you and infinite love for you the way God does. Vulnerability is only scary because we don't do it enough. So we have this very genuine fear that, oh, people are going to leave me. They're going to be disappointed in me. They're going to be mad at me when they really know. But true love, like authentic love, is not going to waver just because somebody found out something about you or they learned, oh, this is my real dream, or oh, this is what I'm really going through, or this is how much I'm struggling with these dark things. Like, that shouldn't diminish somebody's love for you because God's love for us doesn't diminish about our scars and our like weak points and our struggles. So I'm like, yeah, humans aren't God, so it makes sense that plenty of people flee, but then it makes it all the more exciting and heartwarming when there are people who stay. This is basically done, and I'm really excited, like, period. It looks really good, guys. Oh my God, I'm gonna show you. Look at this. Like, look how colorful that is. Look how like vibrant and sexy it is. I didn't use all the ingredients she said. She said you should have grapeseed oil as well as a few other things, but I just didn't do that, so alas. All right, gals, I've done it. The recipe is complete. It's done. It's finished. Again, if you never see me again, it's because the vegan meat killed me as I had it in the freezer and fridge several times over a uncomfortable amount of time that I will not disclose. Like, wow. Do you see that? That's talent. That's talent. Wait, let me get the presentation together. Hold on. Wig. I feel like it should be a Julia and Julia situation. Julia and Me, whatever that series was called. But it's gonna be Tabitha and Me. Me just going through the whole cookbook. Okay, so this is the photo. Okay, so I'm about to recreate it for the thumbnail, and then I'm going to try it because I'm really excited. Oh wow, the lights. Yes. But before I try this, I just want to say, don't let anybody talk you out of being vulnerable. I don't care that my lighting is low and the budget isn't high. Like, I said what I said. Like, vulnerability matters. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. So, vulnerability can actually save your life. Yeah, it can put you in harm's way, but more often than not, it has a funny way of bringing the right people towards you. So, here we go. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Okay, very hot take, but it's actually amazing. I'm gonna put more barbecue sauce on it because that's just me, but it's fine because it turns out Sweet Baby Ray's is vegan, so jot that down, we won. Anyway, thank you so much for watching and for sticking through a part 2, a first time ever on Hill's Kitchen, but it was worth it, and I hope you had an amazing time watching. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next week.